podcast where we share tips, insight, tools, and stories from other changemakers designed to motivate you to become the change you want to see in your world. Make sure you join our Changemakers community at runemagnus.com/podcast. And now it is time for you to sit back, relax, and enjoy.
It's another Changemakers podcast, and today we have a woman that is a special woman for me because a couple of years ago we met at a conference, international conference for women business owners, where she was receiving one of the awards. And as with so many women and people all over the world that I have the opportunity to meet, there are people that sit with you. There are people that hold you somehow. They capture your attention and you want to know more from them and you want to go again and hold that connection going. And that's exactly my guest today. That's exactly another person that has that special uniqueness. Her name is Sharon Rowe, and she is a social entrepreneur, an author, speaker, and the CEO and founder of Ego Bags products to clean up the planet one bag at a time, like she says, and make a good living and put family first. So now we know all about her values. Sharon, she introduced the Ego Bags reusable brand in 1989 and has built a successful tiny impact business from scratch. With more than 9 million bags sold to date, Time magazine called her a pioneer. Glamour magazine featured as an ego hero. Even the Oprah show featured her brand. She's been featured on QVC in the documentary Beckett, received many awards, including the one that I just told you about, the Entrepreneur of the Year with Enterprise Women, and Lillian Barron and CBS Medium. I mean, this woman is magical. What I think is so interesting with Sharon is that she, speaking of personal branding and who comes up in your mind, it just so happens that not so long ago, I was in my own supermarket doing my own shopping. And as I'm waiting in the line for the registers, I see a product in front of me. And as I look at that product, there's a certain logo on the product. And I thought to myself, oh my God! Sharon is in my supermarket. Of course, it wasn't Sharon. It was her Ego Bags who were there ready for me to buy it. Of course, I had already a couple of them in my bag as I was doing my shopping. But nevertheless, that made me think I need to talk to Sharon again. And as I know that Sharon has such a knowledge of how you can, as an entrepreneur or as a business owner or business leader, or you are running your organization, if you're not thinking about social responsibility, then I think you're missing out on a lot of things. And that's why I wanted Sharon to be on this podcast. So, long introduction, but welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you were in your supermarket and called me. I was like, yes, this was meant to happen.
Exactly. And, we're talking about worldwide distribution, obviously, since I'm here in Iceland and you're in the US. But I just want to drill into the first question. Why Ego Bags?
Well, it goes back to way back when. I saw a problem and I decided I wanted to solve it. It was just something that bugged me. It was started out as a personal crusade, if you will. I just didn't want to use those single-use plastic bags. I started noticing them everywhere, stuck in trees, in the gutters, in the rivers, and they broke, and they weren't even useful for a second use. So I thought, well, I'm going to stop doing this. And when I started talking about it with friends and with my husband, and I just had a baby, I thought, this is a problem for other people, but nobody's doing anything about it. And it just so happens that right around that same time, I was looking for the next thing to do. And I knew after having worked in some corporate, but some smaller business, that I didn't want to just plug and play. I didn't want to just show up and make a living and not really have an emotional attachment to what I was doing and or have to make decisions that might nick my values in any way, whether it was amount of time in the office, spending that much time, or in the kind of clients I wanted to work with. I kind of wanted to build a tribe and make my living doing something I felt really in alignment with. So I took it on. I took it on first as a test. I wanted to see, would this fly? Was anybody else really thinking about this? I mean, friends and family are one thing, but when you start knocking on doors and talking to shop owners, because this is 1989 and there was no internet, so you actually had to go talk to people in the middle of their busy day. And I got enough thumbs up that it was like, okay, I'm encouraged. And then there was an opportunity to do a street fair, and then I sold out. And so I saw that there really was a wave at that point happening, that this was the time to get in. I mean, it was a first wave and it was a small wave, and it took a lot of years to develop. But I just decided that I wanted to do something that I needed to do something that where I could make a living. And I wanted to do something that would have an impact. And I mean, there were probably a million things I could have done, but this one was the one that was in front of me. So I ran with it.
And what a pioneer in 1989. I don't think there were many people thinking about those things. I mean, it's almost 30 years ago.
It's almost 30 years ago. Yeah. And I had been an actor in New York City, so I knew how to fail a lot. I also trained as an actor and improviser, so I knew how to make things up. And my husband was a musician, so we knew how to live really well with very little, because that's kind of how you are when you're trying to make it into the arts. So we didn't have a lot of assumptions about how it should roll out. And I didn't have a business degree. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was really making it up.
Oh, you're the perfect example of an entrepreneur who has that passion for it, has that purposeful, that meaningful, the thing that you're going to change the world one bag at a time. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And we picked a name. My husband said, hey, let's call it Eco Bags, in between feeding my son, Actually, he probably was still not even eating food at that point. But anyway, we just picked a name. We said, okay, that's good. And he's a lyricist, my husband. He said, let's do Cleaning Up the Planet one bag at a time. I said, okay, that's good. And we just sort of started.
That's such a beautiful story. And tell me, I'm dying, and I'm sure that our listeners are also dying. How did Eco Bag go to the Oprah show?
Oh, that was a great story. Now, just so you know that it takes a lot of patience and persistence, as you know, as an entrepreneur. We started in 1989. We kind of really launched in 1990 in the beginning of the year. It was 2007 or 8. I can't remember. I've got to look it up when we got on Oprah. I had never watched Oprah. She was not even on my radar. But my mother-in-law watched her every day. And my neighbor, who did not have a full-time position, watched her every day. And they would always talk about Oprah. And I'd be a little bit like, okay, whatever. Here I am working, 2 kids, full-time. And this is before TiVo, right? So you couldn't even tape something.
Yeah.
But they were talking about her so much. I was like, this is a woman who reaches millions of people, and they listen to her and they trust her. I have to be on it. So literally in January of whatever year that was, let's say it was 2007, I said to myself, I need to be on Oprah. I picked up the phone and called the only PR person I'd ever met, because I never used PR from 1990 to 2007. I always did my own stuff. I said, I want to be on Oprah. She basically laughed at me and said, yeah, you and everybody else. And I said, no, I really think it's the time to be on her show. And I'd met this woman at a networking event. Again, the only person I knew, and I hated going to networking events. And it was just the perfect timing. I cannot tell you why, but it was the year that Al Gore was talking about climate change. And it turned out to be the year that Oprah was doing her first Earth Day show. Now, I did not know that when I said I need to be on this show. It's just that second wave was coming in strong. Things come in and go out. Yeah. And then they come in and they go out, just like bubbles come and go out. Yeah. And this was another wave. And I very luckily, through this PR person who then found someone who knew someone on the show, I got on. And I got the phone call, I think it was maybe a few days earlier, that I might be on, send samples right away. They had to go out overnight. And then I didn't even know until 24 hours before that they were going to put the brand on the show. It wasn't me, it was the brand. But I mean, with Oprah simply pointing to a reusable bag while she was talking about reusable bottles, reusable bags. So this is when the first push. It was unbelievable what happened after that.
Wow.
So that was the next wave.
And
that was like a tsunami.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine that. That must have been, yeah. And what did you learn from? Because you are you're an entrepreneur there. You're building your business with all the beauties and and all the hurdles that are always in front of us. And then you get these millions of viewers seeing your bags.
Thousands of orders. So we were prepared, believe it or not, because our business had been growing, but growing incrementally and steadily. So we'd already moved on to one of the first cloud platforms, NetSuite, which we still work on, which is a channel, it's got everything.
Yeah.
So we were immediately able to scale. So all the orders could come in, and we were getting orders by fax, by phone, and we didn't crash the internet. So this is the beginning of the internet too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not the beginning, but we'd been on since the beginning. So we were ready. I mean, other companies, I've heard stories of other companies that have gone out because of the Oprah effect. We soared with it. We just went from, I think we were at like 700, like $750,000. You got to look at it in perspective, which I don't know what that was in 2007, but it was more than just saying 750. And we were profitable, and we grew like 3 times that in under a year.
And for you and your business at that time, you're growing really fast. I know that you're really concerned about social responsibility and keeping your business in that space. What was the challenges for you to honor that process in everything that you're doing? Because I know today you are doing that even with your packaging and everything that is going out. It all has that, is so part of your brand.
Yeah.
So what was the challenges in those days to honor that so that it will be completely ego-friendly?
Yeah. Well, the big thing for us is we didn't want to break our brand, right?
Yeah.
And if our brand stood for clean sourcing, responsible manufacturing, fair wage, fair labor, which we had since 1990. If we wanted to stay with our brand and really grow our brand, it meant we actually had to hold off some growth. And what I mean by that is all these people who came in from the Oprah show said, I want to go green. But what also happened because of Oprah is millions of suppliers saw that show. So anybody who had anything that could be called a reusable bag came in. And we very quickly found ourselves in this commoditized space called reusable bags. And it's a little bit of an oxymoron because a bag is reusable, but not all bags are the same. And not all bags are EcoBags brand. So we had a lot of demand, and we still get it now, although less so, for 99-cent bags, the really low-cost bags. And what we found then, it's changed the platform, the playing ground has changed a little bit since then, but what was happening then is a lot of really inexpensive imports were coming in from overseas. Almost nothing was made here, and it was all made with petroleum. So a consumer really didn't know the difference between a $3.99 or $4 or $5 100% cotton, fairly sourced, fairly made bag, and a 99 or 89 cents sometimes non-woven PP, polypropylene, which is a fossil fuel base. Because it feels like a fabric, it acts like a fabric, but if it was made that inexpensively, who made it? How much were they compensated? And the material itself, well, it's fossil fuel. So we're using a resource that we think is really valuable. This is why plastic bags don't make sense. We're using a resource that we consider really, really valuable, and then we just toss it after one thing. And then these reusable bags that were being made, and they weren't well stitched, so they would break, the handles would break. So it was a rush to market on a lot of ways. And so what we did is we said, no, we don't want to do those kinds of bags. So we had people calling us to do hundreds of thousands of bags in that category that would not match our brand.
Exactly. So really being, which is tough.
Which we said no. We said no. We eventually did find a company who did that type of bag, but who had a socially responsible production chain. So we thought, okay, we can't say no to everybody. So we'll use this bag, which was actually slightly more expensive because we didn't get into the cheap. And then ultimately we found a good supplier for that, but it was never my favorite thing. And we limited the jobs, and we only did it when we saw an opportunity to balance that kind of job with our kind of bags. Because we didn't want to say no to the impetus of reusable. You don't want to just say no. You want to generate as an entrepreneur the relationship with the customer so that you can be part of their education process, and you can be their supplier for a range of goods. So it's kind of like a step down from orthodoxy. You got to bend a little, but there were certain things we wouldn't bend on. And consumers really didn't know. They just saw the top line reusable. They didn't dig in. And I think that's what happened also with food for a really long time. And now people are really digging in and looking at the ingredient. And the same parallel.
Yeah, that makes me go to the question. You talk about wave, that you started up, it was the first wave, then the second wave, and now the question is, which wave are we in right now?
We're probably about in the fourth wave right now. I mean, here's another thing that happened. When we started with this idea of choosing reusable, I never thought of it just as we're selling bags. We're selling a message. We're selling a cultural shift.
Mm-hmm.
We're engaging with people to think about taking their own bag to the store. And if you bring your own bag to the store and you like how it looks, there's a piece of fashion with this. You notice other people at the store. So you're building your tribe who are also using their own bags. And you're educating yourself every step of the way, because you may pick something up and you go, oh, I don't want to put that in my reusable bag because it's completely packaged and I don't need to buy lettuce that is packaged, and et cetera. So that was that first wave, that educational wave. And as that got adopted, then people were started to think about, well, where are things made and how are they made and what are they made of? And that brings us that was the first, and I think around the fourth were pioneer brands who many of whom started at the same time as us or after us, and we didn't know about, we wouldn't even have considered them in our space, are thinking about what's the level of responsibility to the goods that we use.
Yeah.
Do we think about the people who are manufacturing what we're using? Do we think about the farmers who are planting the seeds? Because we used to say from seed to sown. Do we think about the farmers who are planting the seeds? What's their health environment all the way through? And I think that's now where we are in the fourth wave with the most conscious consumers, if you will, in terms of production of goods. Now, at the same time, we have more fast fashion than ever before.
Yeah.
But we also have a leveling out where if it's harder to make a living now, at least in the US, for younger people, they're going to buy the thing that will last the longest. So they're going to look for the quality good. And when they're looking for the quality good, they're going to look at the where and the how and the why, and they're going to find that place that intersects the most they can if they actually have the resources. And the reason I just look to my kids for this, because my daughter though is only a thrift store shopper, but she's looking at those things, and Patagonia and Eileen Fisher and Everlane, and there's a lot of goods out there now who are using their transparency in their supply chain as part of their marketing.
Exactly.
And we need to hold them accountable. And certain people we do just automatically. But, for those that you're a little curious about, there's B corporations where you have to pass a very detailed certification process. We've just been named Best for the World overall for the second year in a row. And for the 3 prior years, we were
and
best.
You call them B corporation. What does that stand for?
Well, if you go to Benefit Corporation, so if you go to bcorporation.net, it's actually an international organization at this point. And what it does is it pulls together and allows for certification for social entrepreneurs, for impact businesses, where they say it's a triple bottom line. I add onto it all the time, but it's people, planet, and profit, understanding that without profit, you cannot proceed. And it's a community of people who are doing good work and doing well. I always add passion and persistence and possibility, because if you are in a community of other impact businesses, whether you're doing something like EcoBags that has the possibility of generating an international cultural shift, or I like to say just a local coffee shop who chooses their coffee roaster based on certain criteria and brings the community together, you're at a touch point. And anytime you can really secure that touch point with really honest and transparent messaging, and just really not messaging, communication. We were always talk to, let's talk with. Those are the tipping points. Those are the points where things can really happen. And when you're in these communities, you have your resources. That's where I was going with this. You have resources.
Exactly.
And there's so many now.
So when
I started for years, there weren't any,
Yeah, well, you've been there for quite a long time.
For a long time. I'm only 26.
Yeah, no, I know. You look only 20, so it's okay. Yeah. So you talk about we're now in the fourth wave. And if you put on your future glasses, where do you see within the next, let's say, 3 years, businesses or an organization or corporations that are not going to think about the social responsibility part of their business, what will happen to them?
I see more and more companies joining what I'd call the movement or the trend than not. Even major corporations like Unilever, because they have a lot of sub-brands that they've bought that are B corporations, so they have to stay with those mandates. Well, okay, for consumer goods, I think it's absolutely 100% required. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to move lose market share. And for some companies, they have to bridge it. They can't just go from 0 to 10. But there's, so long as they say they're on the path. Where it gets tricky, I think, is in products that are not on a shelf. Like consumer goods, you see it, there it is, you hold it, it has a message, and I think it's a currency for ideas. Non-visuals, like banking and finance and life insurance and all those things, you have to go on their word, but then you have to, as a person of interest, go in and dig into their records and see where are they investing. If you really want fossil-free investing, you've got to dig in. A good friend of mine, Rose Yee, and Timothy have this green retirement company, and they help direct businesses with their 401ks so they're fossil-free. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to really be ready to roll up your sleeves and dig in. And so I think a lot of the companies are joining, but they're not always honestly joining. Yeah. And then they're not always, they have a sustainability department, but that sustainability team has to work very closely with the operations team, because ultimately the corporation or the business has to be profitable in order to move forward. So the promises that are made have to be able to be executed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. For them to be able to show that transparency and show it in their statement, and not only showing it there like online, but really in everything that they're doing. If you go and visit the bank, you can see that they are actually thinking about these things with everything that they're handing out and working.
Right, and not hiding it. And sometimes it costs more, and sometimes it doesn't cost more. Sometimes the cost is not in dollars or any other currency. The cost is simply in the amount of time it takes to reset the mechanics of the business so that the considerations are all in alignment. I mean, if you even go as small as like paper, right? Mm-hmm. When I started, and for years and years, it was so hard to get a recycled or a certified paper. Right now, they even have certified tree-free, and they have all sorts of forests and whatever. Now it's not impossible at all. In fact, it's so easy and it's competitive. So it's in the micro decisions and it's in the macro decisions. It's in everything from the supply chain to how you manage your compensation for your employees, and vacations and personal time off. It's a huge cultural shift.
It's a huge cultural shift. When listening to you, I start to think about the importance for us as consumers to be aware of what is happening with the businesses that we are doing business with, and how much control we have.
We have a lot of control. And I only realized within the last maybe 7 years, I think, is when I started my, there's no place like home. Just even in your own community, business people have stature. Yeah. And sometimes it can feel a little uncomfortable because at least for me, I want to be straight up honest. I don't want to come off as with any ego or like I'm better or have done more or less. But the truth is, other people shine the light on me because they see that of the choices I've made. So by them shining a light on me puts me in a leadership position, which whether I want to or not, I have to accept it. Mm-hmm. And by accepting it, I then it causes me to really look at what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then I become an example, just like the local coffee shop. I keep going down to that, of what's possible when you do something where the decisions you make are well thought out, and where they return to what I call tiny business. Tiny meaning not a small business. You can be a tiny business and be very small, but you can be a multi-million-dollar business and be tiny. Tiny is intention. When you strip away all the things you cannot abide by, all the compromises, all of that, and you really drive down the line of what's going to work for me and what's going to work for this business, because ultimately you have to keep feeding it and you cannot exhaust yourself. That there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't know where that went, but that's where it wound up. Because we're leaders. Businesses are leaders. Whether you're meeting with only one person because you're a consultant and then another person, these are all spark points.
Absolutely.
And I think we're going to move away from just having mega corporations tell us. But I think in the world of Amazon, we'll see. We're watching how everything's breaking out and being put back together again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we probably could go on for another episode just about tiny business, come to think of it, because I think that concept is really interesting concept. from the angle that you're taking it. But we're on the hour, and we need to finish this right now. One more question. If you're talking to a leader, a manager or a leader who wants to do a change in their organization, what would you say is the first thing he or she needs to think about to be more socially responsible?
I would say make a list of what matters most to you personally. And if you can't make a list of what matters most, make a list of what you cannot live with. Not everybody can go to the positive. Sometimes you reveal the positive by putting in the negative.
Yeah.
And, they're not grandiose things. Sometimes it really always comes down to time.
Maybe it just comes down to the tiny things.
Yeah. I mean, what do we want? What's better than, you may long for a luxury vacation, but really what matters most is sitting down with someone you love and having a meal.
That's a great thought. Great thought. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing your insight to the Changemakers podcast. We appreciate that. And all show notes will be on about how to follow you on the social media and to your website. And then, of course, your book that is coming out. We're going to have a link to that one as well. And from that note, I'm going to say bless from here in Iceland.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And I welcome any other questions by email too, whatever. I mean, it's a big conversation, and there are tribes here and internationally that are discussing this on a daily basis.
We'll leave that as well on the show notes. Thanks so much.
Bye.
If so, feel free to share the love and give us your generous review on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify. And remember, you can always go to runamagnus.com and find out more about the Changemakers and how we can help you driving the change you want to see in your